Hi, class. I'd like to look at a relationship between Karl Marx and, of all people, John Locke. Now, Karl Marx, as we know, is the originator of Marxism and often the most common variety of communism. And John Locke is the originator of what we think of as contemporary capitalism. But there is one thing that they both share. And I think that's important for this next paper coming up that you're going to be writing on whether or not Trump is a fascist or a libertarian or whatever you want to do. But this is an interesting insight. According to John Locke, there is no value in any product unless it has to do with human labor. So this is called the labor theory of value. And I'll explain it to you in a minute. Labor theory of value. Now, the labor theory of value has to do with the fact that people don't really attach value to things. We attach value to the human labor that goes into the creation of a thing. For example, a tree in the forest has no value whatsoever, strictly speaking. But once you cut it down, you can then sell that tree. But you can't sell it while it's in the forest. Or if you were, it would be sold for a whole lot less. But once you cut it down, your labor cutting down the tree increases the value of the tree. If you cut into firewood, that's more labor, that increases the value of the tree even more. If you plane the tree into boards, then it's worth even more. If you turn it into a piece of furniture, that same tree is worth a tremendous amount more money. Now, the difference in each of these cases is the kind of labor that goes into the transformation of that raw material into your private property. So according to John Locke, and this is who we're looking at now, John Locke, L-O-C-K-E. John Locke is the fellow who came up with the idea of the three unalienable natural rights, which is what the United States Constitution is based on, that we have the right to life, to liberty, and estates. But according to John Locke, what people trade is their labor. Now, one of the peculiarities of trading your labor is that if I trade my labor for onions, eventually they go bad. So if I grow a tremendous amount of vegetables of some sort and I don't sell those vegetables, all those vegetables will die and the value of my labor will be wasted. So I need to be able to trade those vegetables for something that people want. And what would it be? They want something, say somebody wants to buy corn, but I'm not going to be able to have a strict trade for tomatoes for corn. So what I might do instead is trade those tomatoes for money. Now, one of the great things about money is money never rots. So I trade my labor, I get that money. That money is symbolized value, that money symbolizes labor. So strictly speaking, money is nothing but distilled labor. That's what Karl Marx calls it too. So we have this idea that labor alone is what creates value. This is what really based economies are based on. Now, you may have seen my tape on the why are kiwis and giant eagle, and you'll notice in that video, the argument I'm making is that the reason that kiwis are in giant eagle is because of this labor theory of value. Now, how does Marx come in? Karl Marx takes this very same idea of the labor theory of value, and he says, interestingly enough, we have two kinds of value. We have one value that he calls exchange value, and this is now Marx, the father of contemporary communism. So they both Marx and Locke, agree with this idea of the labor theory of value. But Marx makes a distinction between exchange value and what he calls use value. Very interesting idea, exchange value versus use value. The exchange value of a product is how much money you can trade it for. So the value of a chair that's made out of mahogany will be higher than the value of a chair that's made out of plastic. So how does the labor theory of value come into that? Aren't both chairs the same amount of usefulness? Well, actually, it turns out they are. So the chair made out of mahogany is the same use value as the chair made out of plastic, but the mahogany chair has a much higher exchange value, even though the use value is the same. All right, let's look at pants. You can buy a pair of inexpensive Walmart pants, or you can buy a pair of very expensive, fancy blue jeans at a different store. I have a pair called diesel blue jeans. You can buy a pair of diesel blue jeans, $200 for a pair of blue jeans. Or you can buy a pair of blue jeans at Aldi, which I bought a couple of weeks ago, $6. Both pairs of blue jeans do exactly the same thing. They cover your butt. Now, why is one pair of blue jeans that has the same usefulness as the other worth so many times more? What causes that change in exchange value and use value? According to Marx, that change is based on the labor theory of value again. So in other words, a lot more labor goes into creating the advertising, and advertising is extremely expensive because many, many people are involved in it. That advertising drives up the exchange value. Also, there's tremendous amount of labor that goes into all the attention to detail in the more expensive blue jeans than in the less expensive blue jeans. They're exactly the same usefulness. A Mercedes-Benz is precisely the same as a Ford Fiesta. Both cars have exactly the same use value, but the Mercedes is worth more in money. So Marx says, excuse me, Marx says this distinction between exchange value and use value is based on the fact that people are really more interested in something that he calls a fetish. And in essence, what that means is that we like things that took more labor than things that took less labor. And we think that that labor is so exciting to us that we forget the usefulness of a product. In other words, we turn certain kinds of commodities into fetishes. And a fetish is something you love not because of its usefulness, but because of what it symbolizes. Think of things like people who claim they have a shoe fetish. They look at a shoe and it makes them excited. Well, that's a pretty peculiar thing, because what that means is they see a shoe and it gives them an interest in something which is quite different than the shoe, but the shoe reminds them of it. Or think of a superstition. I'm afraid of a black cat. That's also a kind of a fetish. When you have a black cat, you associate that poor little animal with a whole series of things. This is also called a fetish. A fetish is when you attach value to something that's beyond what its value actually is. Is when you look at a symbol and you forget that it's a symbol. You look at a symbol, but you forget that it is a symbol. Think of the symbol of a swastika. I see that symbol and I tremble. But why? It's just a symbol, because I don't just see the swastika, I see tremendous amount of violence. Or look at a piece of paper money itself. If I threw a $20 bill on the floor and you saw, oh my God, a $20 bill, you'd be excited. Or even a $1 bill. You say, oh my gosh, what's a $1 bill? It's worth almost nothing. But the symbol has now become attached to this fetishistic value. And that's what Marx calls the fetishistic value of the commodity. Commodity are the things you buy. Commodity, he calls it the fetishistic value of the commodity. Now, I wrote an article on that you can read talking about the fetishistic value of the commodity. I think it refers to Victoria's Secret and for all you know, the fetishistic components of breastfeeding. But it's an interesting thing, because what happens is that we look at certain things because of what they symbolize, and we become attached to them. Now, how is this to do with exchange value? Remember, the only thing that people value, says John Locke, is labor. So something that has had a lot of labor invested into it, we think of as valuable. There's no useful difference between a Louis Vuitton handbag and a Kmart handbag. Well, they don't have Kmart anymore, but a Louis Vuitton handbag and a Walmart handbag. Both handbags do precisely the same thing. What happens is that one handbag took a lot more labor, the other handbag took a lot less labor. Because of the labor that goes into its creation, we turn that thing that took more labor into a fetish. And that fetishistic value of the commodity is why people are willing to die to buy garbage. I mean, it's really a fact. And look at some of the things that we're willing to spend tremendous amounts of money on. Fancy cars, fancy shoes, so forth and so on. Why are they so valuable? Not because they have more usefulness, but because of the fetishistic value. There was a perfume many years ago called Joy Perfume. And Joy Perfume was the most expensive perfume in the world. Interestingly, it didn't smell much different than any other perfume. So why was it so expensive? Because Joy Perfume, they spent a fortune in advertising and promoting this thing. They turned a particular smell into the smell of money. So there you have it. This is the fetishistic value of the commodity, which means that what we value when it comes to exchange value is not something's usefulness, but this symbolic quality it has. The symbol stands for something, and then we forget that the symbol is a symbol. This is not new. In the Bible, this is referred to quite a bit. And you would not imagine what it is. It's when you confuse an icon with an idol. And so what is this symbolic with this fetishism? It's idolatry. And you'll find this in the Bible. St. Paul says, do not be idolaters. Do not worship false gods. Well, that's exactly what happens. We worship things that are not actually valuable, we worship them because they have a fetishistic value, because we confuse their symbol, something that stands for something else, with the thing itself, and we begin to worship the symbol as if it were the God. We worship the icon, a picture of God, as if the piece of icon itself is God. We worship the handbag as if the handbag is valuable, when really it just symbolizes the idea of labor itself. So thank you very much. That's the relationship between the labor theory of value, exchange value, and use value as Marx describes it. And you see a relationship then between capitalism and communism. Both systems recognize that education, the value of labor, is what creates value in all things. People don't really like things. What people need is the capacity of other people to create things that are new. Thank you very much.